The ship called Vigilance was the most famous military academy in the entire Galactic Coalition, and every species in the known galaxy sent their best young warriors to train aboard her massive decks. But there was a problem. His name was Cadet 13. He stood 7 feet tall with 4 muscular arms and scales that glowed a soft blue in the darkness, and his eyes burned amber like dying stars whenever he grew angry, which was often his species. The Vrexians had evolved on a brutal jungle world where only the strongest and most cunning survived, and Cadet 13 had survived very well indeed. He had claws that could slice through metal and teeth designed for tearing flesh, and he moved with the silent grace of something that had spent millions of years perfecting the art of killing. The other cadets feared him, and he liked it that way. On his first day aboard the Vigilance, he had walked into the mess hall and demanded the seat of a smaller cadet, a trembling insectoid creature from the peaceful mining colonies. When the creature refused, Cadet 13 had simply picked him up with 2 of his 4 arms and thrown him across the room. No one reported the incident. On his second week, he had sabotaged a training exercise by reprogramming the combat drones to attack only his team members, and when the instructors investigated, they found no evidence because Cadet 13 had been very careful. 3 cadets ended up in the medical bay with burns and broken limbs, and Cadet 13 smiled his sharp-toothed smile and said nothing. By his 3rd month, everyone on Deck 7 knew the rules. You did not look Cadet 13 in the eyes unless you wanted trouble, and you did not speak to him unless spoken to first, and you certainly did not report him to the instructors because the last cadet who tried that had mysteriously fallen down an elevator shaft. The instructors knew what he was doing, but they could not prove anything, and besides, his combat scores were exceptional. Commander Yeltrix, a stern, 4-armed Korthan female who had fought in 3 galactic wars, called him into her office one evening and tried to intimidate him into better behavior. He responded by stealing classified rations from her personal quarters and eating them in front of her the very next day, right there in the command center. With everyone watching, she could not punish him without proof. And he had been very careful about the security cameras. That was the day everyone truly understood that Cadet 13 was untouchable. He walked the corridors of Deck 7 like a king, and the other cadets scattered before him like prey animals fleeing a predator, which in a very real sense was exactly what they were. Some nights he would simply sit in the darkened observation deck and watch the stars drift by, and he would think about how boring this academy was, and how none of these soft creatures offered any real challenge. He missed the jungles of his home world where every moment was a fight for survival, where predators lurked in every shadow and only the strongest earned the right to see another sunrise. Here there was only weakness and fear and rules that protected the weak from the strong. It disgusted him. Then one morning the announcement came over the ship-wide communication system and everything changed. "Attention all personnel," the automated voice declared. "A transfer cadet will be arriving at 600 hours tomorrow. Please prepare appropriate quarters on Deck 7. The mess hall buzzed with curious whispers, and Cadet 13 leaned back in his seat with mild interest as the announcement continued. "The transfer cadet is from Earth, a human male designated Eli Chen. All personnel are reminded that humans are Class 7 Death World survivors and should be treated with standard diplomatic courtesy." The whispers turned to confused murmurs. Cadet 13 had heard of humans before, but he had never actually seen one, and from what he understood, they were rather unimpressive creatures. They had no claws and no fangs and no natural armor, and their soft pink skin could be punctured by practically anything, and they could not even see in the dark or hear ultrasonic frequencies like most civilized species. Yes, they came from a death world, but plenty of species came from death worlds, and most of them were nothing special. The only unusual thing about humans was their strange endurance, their ability to simply keep moving long after other species would have collapsed from exhaustion. But what good was endurance against sharp claws and superior strength? A smile spread across his face, revealing rows of pointed teeth. Finally, he thought, some entertainment. The human would arrive tomorrow, soft and weak and probably terrified of everything aboard this ship, and Cadet 13 would enjoy teaching him how things worked on Deck 7. Perhaps he would start by taking the human's belongings and throwing them out an airlock, or perhaps he would simply corner the creature in a dark corridor and show him exactly why Vrexians were considered apex predators throughout the galaxy. The possibilities were delightful. That night, Cadet 13 slept better than he had in months, dreaming of the fear he would see in the human's eyes when they finally met. He did not know that his life was about to change forever. He did not know that the human was bringing something with him, something small and soft and seemingly harmless, something that would turn his entire world upside down and make him question everything he thought he knew about predators and prey. He did not know about the cat. But he would learn. Oh yes, he would learn very soon, and the lesson would haunt him for the rest of his days. For now, though, he simply smiled in his sleep, completely unaware that his reign of terror was about to meet its match in the most unexpected form imaginable. The stars drifted silently past the observation windows, and somewhere in the vast darkness of space, a small transport ship carried a human, and his companion ever closer to the Vigilance. Tomorrow would change everything. The transport ship docked at exactly 600 hours, and half the cadets on Deck 7 had gathered in the hangar bay to see the human arrive. Cadet 13 stood at the back of the crowd with his forearms crossed over his chest, his amber eyes watching the airlock with predatory interest. The door hissed open, and out stepped the most underwhelming creature he had ever seen. The human was barely 6 feet tall, with smooth brown skin and short black hair, and eyes that were simply dark brown without any glow or special features at all. He wore the standard gray uniform of a transfer cadet, and he carried a simple bag over one shoulder, and he was smiling. Actually smiling? As if arriving on a ship full of alien warriors was somehow a pleasant experience. Cadet 13 felt a flicker of disappointment because this was going to be even easier than he had expected, but then he noticed something else. The human was carrying a container in his other hand, a small metal box with air holes punched in the sides, and something inside that box was moving drill instructor Kothron, a massive insectoid with clicking mandibles and compound eyes, stepped forward to greet the new arrival with obvious suspicion. "Human," he barked. "What is in that container? All personal items must be declared and inspected before boarding." The human's smile did not waver even slightly. "This is my emotional support animal," he replied in a calm and friendly voice. "Her name is Mochi, and Regulation 7C of the Galactic Coalition Military Code permits service and support animals aboard training vessels. I have all the proper documentation right here." He pulled a small data chip from his pocket and handed it to the instructor, who examined it with obvious annoyance. "This appears to be in order," Kothron admitted reluctantly. "But what exactly is this creature? I have never heard of a Mochi before." "She is a cat," the human explained. "A domesticated predator from Earth. They have lived alongside humans for thousands of years as companions and hunters of small pests." He knelt down and opened the container. Every cadet in the hangar bay leaned forward to see what would emerge, and Cadet 13 found himself doing the same, despite his determination to appear uninterested. Out stepped a small creature covered in soft orange and white fur, with 4 legs and a long tail and ears that swiveled toward every sound in the hangar. It was tiny, perhaps the length of the human's forearm, and it looked soft and fluffy and completely harmless. But then Cadet 13 noticed the eyes. The creature had forward-facing eyes, which meant it was a predator because only predators needed depth perception for hunting, and those eyes were a pale green color with vertical slit pupils that were currently scanning the entire hangar bay with unsettling intensity. The creature, This cat, called Mochi, moved with absolute silence as it stepped out of the container and sat down beside the human's feet. Its tail flicked once, slowly and deliberately, like a hunter deciding which prey to pursue first. Drill instructor Kothron took an involuntary step backward, his mandibles clicking nervously. "It is very small," he said, but his voice had lost some of its authority. "She is a good girl," the human replied, reaching down to stroke the creature's fur. "She will not cause any trouble, I promise." The cat began making a strange rumbling sound, a deep vibration that seemed to come from somewhere inside its chest. And Cadet 13 felt something strange happen. A cold sensation crawled up his spine. He had felt this sensation before, many years ago on his homeworld, when he had accidentally wandered into the territory of a creature much larger and more dangerous than himself. It was the feeling of being watched by something that considered you prey. But that was ridiculous because this cat was tiny and soft and could not possibly pose any threat to a Vrexian warrior. He shook off the feeling and pushed his way through the crowd, determined to establish dominance over this new arrival before anyone else could. "Human," he growled, looming over Eli with all four arms spread wide to display his size and strength. "I am Cadet 13, and I run Deck 7. You would be wise to remember that." The human looked up at him without any fear in his eyes, which was annoying, and then he smiled again. "Nice to meet you, Cadet 13. I am Eli, and this is Mochi. I hope we can be friends." "Friends?" Cadet 13 laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the hangar bay. "We will not be friends, human. You will learn your place, and it is beneath me." He glanced down at the cat, intending to make some threatening comment about what he might do to such a small and helpless creature. The cat was staring directly at him. Its green eyes did not blink, and its pupils had narrowed to thin black slits, and its tail had stopped moving entirely. It sat perfectly still, watching him with an expression that he could not read, but that made his scales itch with discomfort. "Your pet does not seem to like me," he said, trying to sound dismissive. "Mochi likes everyone," Eli replied cheerfully. "She is just getting to know you. Cats are very curious creatures." The cat blinked once, slowly, and then looked away as if Cadet 13 was no longer worthy of her attention. He felt strangely insulted. "Take your creature and your belongings to your quarters," he growled, "and stay out of my way." He turned and stalked out of the hangar bay. But even as he walked away, he could feel those green eyes watching him. That night he had trouble sleeping, and he told himself it was because the ship's temperature controls were malfunctioning. It had nothing to do with the cat. Nothing at all. The first time Cadet 13 saw the cat where it should not be, he convinced himself it was a coincidence. He had been walking through a darkened corridor on Deck 4, 3 full levels away from the human's quarters, when he noticed a pair of glowing green eyes watching him from inside a ventilation shaft. He stopped and stared, and the eyes stared back without blinking. "How did you get up here?" he muttered, but the cat offered no answer. It simply watched him for a long moment, then turned and vanished silently into the darkness of the shaft. Cadet 13 stood alone in the corridor for several minutes, trying to understand what he had just seen. The ventilation shafts were supposed to be sealed and secured, and there was no way a small creature could travel through them without triggering the motion sensors. He decided the cat must have followed him somehow, sneaking along behind him without making any sound, and he had simply not noticed. It was the only explanation that made sense. But then it happened again, and again, and again. Over the following weeks, Cadet 13 began seeing the cat everywhere he went, always watching, always silent, always appearing in places where it had no business being. He found it sitting on top of his locker in the training room, even though the lockers were 8 feet tall and there was nothing nearby to climb. He spotted it perched on a support beam in the engineering section, licking its paw with casual indifference, while toxic coolant pipes hummed just inches away. He woke up one night to find it sitting outside his quarters, visible through the small window in his door, its eyes glowing in the emergency lighting. When he opened the door to confront it, the corridor was empty. There was no sound of retreating footsteps, no indication that anything had been there at all. Just silence and shadows and the lingering feeling of being watched. He began having trouble concentrating during training exercises because he kept glancing over his shoulder, expecting to see those green eyes staring at him from some impossible location. The other cadets noticed his distraction, and whispers began spreading through Deck 7. Something was wrong with Cadet 13, they said. Something had changed. He was not the same terrifying predator he used to be. Cadet 13 heard the whispers, and they made him angry. He was a Vrexian warrior, an apex predator, the terror of Deck 7, and he refused to be intimidated by a creature that weighed less than his smallest arm. He decided to confront the human and put an end to this nonsense. He found Eli in the training bay, practicing hand-to-hand combat with a sparring drone, and he was surprised to see how efficiently the human moved. Humans were not supposed to be fast or strong, but Eli flowed around the drone's attacks with a strange fluid grace, always moving, never stopping, wearing the machine down with endless strikes and dodges. Still, Cadet 13 was not impressed because a Vrexian could destroy such a drone in seconds with brute force alone. He stepped forward, intending to grab the human and slam him against the wall, intending to make it very clear that the cat needed to be kept under control. But before he could take a second step, he heard a sound from above. A low, rumbling vibration filled the air, deep and resonant, like distant thunder or the growl of some massive predator. He looked up. The cat was sitting on a support beam near the ceiling, 20 feet above the floor, staring down at him with those unblinking green eyes. The rumbling sound was coming from its chest. He had heard the cat make this sound before, when Eli stroked its fur, and the human had called it purring and said it meant the cat was happy. But this did not sound happy. This sounded like a warning. Cadet 13 felt his scales change color involuntarily, shifting from confident blue to a paler shade that indicated fear, and he hated himself for it. "Your creature," he said to Eli, his voice slightly unsteady. "It follows me everywhere. Make it stop." Eli looked up from his sparring session and smiled that infuriating smile. "Mochi goes where she wants," he replied. "Cats are independent like that. She must find you interesting." "I do not want to be interesting to your pet." "Then maybe stop being so interesting," Eli suggested with a shrug. "Cats are attracted to movement and to creatures that react strongly. If you ignore her, she will probably get bored." Cadet 13 wanted to argue, wanted to threaten, wanted to do something to regain control of this situation, but the cat was still watching him from above. He turned and left the training bay without another word. That night he tried to ignore the feeling of being watched as he walked back to his quarters, but when he reached his door he found something waiting for him. A small, dead creature, some kind of rodent from the ship's lower cargo holds where such pests sometimes bred, despite the crew's best efforts. It lay on the floor in front of his door, perfectly positioned, clearly placed there with deliberate intent. The cat was nowhere to be seen, but Cadet 13 knew exactly who had left this gift. In the predator cultures of 100 different worlds, leaving a kill at someone's door was a message. It meant I can reach you whenever I want. It meant nowhere is safe. Cadet 13 did not sleep at all that night. He sat in his quarters with all 4 arms wrapped around his knees, watching the door and trying to convince himself that he was not afraid of a creature that weighed 8 pounds. He failed. The attack came without warning during a routine training jump through the Kelvor Nebula. One moment, the Vigilance was cruising peacefully through purple clouds of cosmic dust, and the next moment alarms were screaming and explosions were rocking the ship and hostile vessels were attaching themselves to the hull like parasites, Korvax pirates, the worst scum in the galaxy, raiders who captured ships and sold their crews into slavery on the black markets of a dozen lawless worlds. Cadet 13 was in the medical bay when the first boarding party breached Deck 7, getting treatment for a training injury he had received earlier that day. He heard the plasma fire before he saw the attackers, and then 4 Korvax soldiers burst through the door, with weapons raised and murder in their eyes. They were big, ugly creatures with gray, leathery skin and tusks jutting from their lower jaws, and cybernetic implants covering half their faces. "Stay where you are," the lead Korvax commanded, pointing his plasma rifle at Cadet 13. "Move, and you die. You are valuable cargo now." Cadet 13 considered fighting, considered using his claws to tear these raiders apart, but there were 4 of them with ranged weapons and only 1 of him with nothing but his natural armaments. He was a predator, but he was not stupid. He raised his 4 arms in surrender and waited for an opportunity. That was when the human appeared in the doorway behind the Korvax soldiers. Eli Chen did not look soft or harmless anymore. His face was covered in blood from a cut on his forehead, and his uniform was torn, and his eyes had changed somehow, becoming hard and focused in a way that Cadet 13 had never seen before. "Get down," Eli said in a voice that was completely calm. Cadet 13 dropped to the floor without hesitation, surprising himself with how quickly he obeyed. What happened next would haunt him for the rest of his life. The human moved, not fast in the way that Vrexians were fast, not with explosive bursts of predatory speed, but with something else entirely, something relentless and unstoppable like a force of nature. The first Korvax turned and fired, but Eli was already moving, already closing the distance, already inside the rifle's effective range. He grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and swung it into the raider's skull with a crack that echoed through the medical bay. The second Korvax tried to bring his weapon around, but Eli kicked his knee sideways with a sickening crunch and then drove an elbow into his throat. 2 pirates down in less than 3 seconds, the third Korvax managed to fire, and the plasma bolt hit Eli in the shoulder and burned through his uniform and seared the flesh beneath. The human did not stop. He did not even slow down. He just kept coming, absorbing the pain, ignoring the injury, closing the distance with that terrible, relentless momentum. Cadet 13 watched in horrified fascination as Eli slammed the fire extinguisher into the third raider's face, once, twice, 3 times, until the creature stopped moving. The fourth Korvax turned to run. He made it exactly 5 steps down the corridor before something small and orange dropped from the ceiling onto his head. The screaming began immediately. Mochi had somehow gotten into the ventilation system and tracked the boarding party through the ship, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And now she was demonstrating exactly why cats had been apex predators on Earth for millions of years. Her claws found eyes and ears and sensitive spots that the Korvax's armor did not protect, and her teeth sank into anything soft enough to bite, and she moved with blinding speed, never staying in one place long enough to be grabbed or thrown off. The Korvax flailed wildly, crashing into walls and equipment, screaming about demons and monsters and begging for someone to help him. Eli walked calmly down the corridor, still bleeding from his shoulder wound, and picked up one of the fallen plasma rifles. "Mochi," he said, "that is enough." The cat immediately disengaged, leaping from the raider's ruined face to land silently on the floor beside her human. The Korvax collapsed against the wall, whimpering, his face a mess of deep scratches and bite marks, completely broken by a creature that weighed less than 10 pounds. "Please," he sobbed, "keep it away from me. I surrender. I surrender." Eli looked down at him without mercy. "Tell your friends to retreat," he said. "Tell them the ship is defended." The Korvax activated his communicator with trembling hands and screamed at his companions to fall back, to get off the ship, to run away before the demon killed them all. Within minutes, the surviving raiders were fleeing back to their vessels, and within an hour, the vigilance was secure again. Cadet 13 found Eli in the medical bay. Getting his shoulder wound treated by the ship's automated systems, Mochi was curled up in his lap, purring contentedly, as if she had not just mauled a pirate twice her size into submission. "You saved my life," Cadet 13 said slowly. "Why would you do that? I have been nothing but cruel to you since you arrived." Eli shrugged with his good shoulder. "You were in danger. It was the right thing to do. Besides, Mochi seems to like you." "Like me?" Cadet 13 stared at the cat, who opened one eye and regarded him with that unreadable green gaze. "She has been stalking me for weeks, leaving dead things at my door, appearing in impossible places to watch me sleep." "Yes," Eli agreed with a smile. "That means she likes you. Cats only do that with creatures they have adopted into their family. The dead things are gifts. She is trying to teach you how to hunt." Cadet 13 did not know how to respond to that information. "What are you people?" he finally whispered. "What kind of world creates creatures like you and her?" Eli was quiet for a moment, stroking Mochi's fur while the medical systems finished sealing his wound. "Earth is a difficult place," he said. "Everything there is trying to kill everything else, and humans survive by being stubborn and by making friends with the deadliest creatures we could find. Dogs, horses, cats. We turned predators into partners and partners into family." He looked up at Cadet 13 with those strange, soft human eyes. "Maybe we can do the same thing here." The Vigilance limped back to the nearest Coalition starbase for repairs, and the journey took 3 weeks through the quietest shipping lanes in the sector. During those 3 weeks, everything changed on Deck 7. The story of the human and his cat spread through the ship like wildfire, growing more dramatic with each retelling until it barely resembled what had actually happened. In some versions, Eli had killed a dozen pirates with his bare hands, while the cat held off an entire boarding party by herself, and in other versions, the cat was actually some kind of ancient Earth demon that the human had bound to his service through dark rituals. The Korvax survivors were not helping matters because they had been captured and locked in the brig, and they spent their days huddled in corners whispering about the small orange death that had fallen from the ceiling. "The human is bad enough," one of them reportedly said during interrogation. "But at least you can see the human coming. That creature appears from nowhere like a ghost made of knives and hatred." Commander Yeltrix called Eli to her office and awarded him a Medal of Valor for his actions during the attack, and she tried to give Mochi a commendation as well. But the cat was unimpressed by the certificate and tried to eat it. Eli received the medal with humble grace and immediately returned to his quarters, where he spent most of his time reading and caring for his cat and generally being the calmest person aboard a ship full of traumatized cadets. Cadet 13 watched all of this from a distance, trying to understand what he was feeling. His entire world view had been built on a simple foundation. The strong dominated the weak, and fear was the only reliable form of respect, and forming attachments made you vulnerable. But the human had challenged all of those beliefs. Eli was not the strongest creature on the ship, not physically, but he had walked into a room full of armed pirates and won through sheer determination and an absolute refusal to stop fighting. And he had done it to save someone who had treated him badly, someone who had threatened him and insulted him and made his life difficult from the moment he arrived. Why would anyone do that? Cadet 13 found himself thinking about his home world, about the endless competition and violence that had shaped his species, about the loneliness of being an apex predator who could trust no one. Was that really strength, or was it just another form of weakness? One evening, he found himself walking toward the observation deck without really planning to, and when he arrived, he found exactly what some part of him had expected. Eli was there, sitting in a chair near the windows with Mochi curled up in his lap. The stars drifted past in silence, and the purple glow of the Kelvor Nebula was visible in the distance. And for a moment, Cadet 13 just stood in the doorway watching. "You can come in," Eli said without turning around. "There is another chair if you want to sit." Cadet 13 hesitated, then walked slowly across the room and lowered himself into the empty chair beside the human. Mochi opened her eyes and looked at him. And for once, those green eyes did not seem threatening, just curious and watchful and perhaps a little friendly. "I have been thinking," Cadet 13 said slowly, "about what you did during the attack, about why you did it." "And what did you decide?" "I decided that I do not understand humans at all." Eli laughed softly, a warm sound that held no mockery. "That is fair. We do not always understand ourselves either." They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars, and Cadet 13 found that the silence was not uncomfortable, the way silences usually were. It was almost peaceful. "Your world," he finally said. "Earth. What else lives there? You said cats are predators, but Mochi is very small. Are there larger predators?" Eli considered the question. "Many larger predators, yes, wolves and bears and great cats called lions and tigers. Some of them weigh over 500 pounds and have teeth as long as your claws. And we have crocodiles, ancient reptiles that have not changed in millions of years because they were already perfect killing machines." Cadet 13 felt his scales pale slightly. "And humans live alongside these creatures?" "We do. We always have. Some people even keep the dangerous ones as pets." "Pets?" Cadet 13 repeated in disbelief. "Your species keeps 500-pound predators as pets?" "Not commonly, but yes, it happens. Humans form bonds with almost anything if given the chance." The Vrexian was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. "Mochi is small," he said slowly, "and she has terrified me for weeks. If your world produces predators 10 times her size, then I think I understand now why the galaxy considers Earth a death world." "Mochi would be offended that you called her small," Eli said with a smile. "She thinks she is very large and very dangerous." As if to confirm this, the cat stretched luxuriously in Eli's lap and yawned, displaying rows of tiny, needle-sharp teeth. Cadet 13 found himself smiling, actually smiling, and he could not remember the last time he had done that. "I would like," he said carefully, choosing his words with unusual care, "to be your ally, perhaps someday your friend, if you would permit it." He glanced at the cat. "And if Mochi permits it." The cat stared at him for a long moment with those unblinking green eyes, then slowly blinked once, twice, and looked away with an air of regal acceptance. "That means she likes you," Eli explained. "The slow blink is a sign of trust among cats. She has decided you are acceptable." "Acceptable," Cadet 13 repeated. "I am the terror of Deck 7, the most dangerous cadet on this ship, and your 8-pound cat has decided I am acceptable. Would you prefer she decided you were unacceptable?" Cadet 13 remembered the screaming Korvax with his face full of claw marks. "No," he said quickly. "Acceptable is good. I am happy to be acceptable." Eli laughed again, and after a moment Cadet 13 found himself laughing too. It was a strange feeling, laughing with someone instead of at them, but it was not unpleasant. Over the following weeks and months, the most unlikely friendship in Coalition history began to form. The former bully of Deck 7 became the humans' closest companion, and together they proved themselves in battle after battle and training exercise after training exercise. The other cadets did not know what to make of this new Cadet 13, this reformed menace who protected the weak instead of preying on them, and who could often be found sitting in the mess hall having quiet conversations with the human and his strange orange pet, but they knew better than to question it. Because wherever Cadet 13 went, Mochi was never far behind, watching from the shadows with those knowing green eyes, and no one, absolutely no one, wanted to upset the cat.